It was a bright Saturday afternoon in Beverly Hills, California, where Rodeo Drive buzzed with its usual energy. The street was alive with expensive cars rolling slowly past glamorous storefronts, tourists snapping photos, and wealthy shoppers strolling from boutique to boutique, carrying glossy bags with logos worth more than most people's paychecks. Among the countless high-end stores, one luxury boutique stood out, a pristine building of glass and marble, displaying elegant suits and gowns that cost more than some people's entire yearly rent. It was the kind of place where status was everything, where appearances meant more than words, and where the staff had mastered the art of reading a customer's worth by the clothes on their back. That afternoon, a man named Richard Thompson walked through the glass doors. At first glance, Richard didn't look like someone who belonged there. His jeans were faded, his shirt a little wrinkled, and his shoes were scuffed from years of use. He wore no designer belt, no expensive watch, no flashy sunglasses. His hair was unstyled, and he looked more like a tired traveler than someone ready to spend thousands of dollars on luxury clothing. To the sales associates working inside the boutique, he was invisible before he even opened his mouth. The boutique was quiet, with only a handful of customers browsing racks of tailored suits and silk dresses. The associates, perfectly dressed in slim black uniforms, carried themselves with an air of superiority, trained to fawn over wealthy clients while brushing off anyone who didn't look the part. When Richard stepped inside, the two associates at the counter glanced at him, gave him a quick up-and-down scan, and then exchanged a smirk. They didn't bother to greet him. Instead, they returned to their hushed conversation about a real client who had just purchased a $15,000 handbag earlier that morning. Richard, however, didn't seem fazed. He looked around slowly, carefully taking in the racks of suits. His eyes lingered on one section in particular, tailored Italian tuxedos, the kind worn at red carpet galas and charity events. He approached the rack, gently running his hand across the fabric, appreciating the craftsmanship. But as he reached for one of the jackets, an associate named Amanda appeared suddenly, her expression sharp, her smile fake. "Sir, those are very expensive pieces," she said coolly. "Maybe you'd be more comfortable browsing our accessories section." Her tone wasn't helpful. It was condescending, as if she were politely telling him he couldn't afford what he was touching. Richard raised his eyebrows slightly, but didn't respond. Instead, he continued browsing, moving toward another section with tailored suits. A second associate, Daniel, intercepted him this time. "Those start at $8,000, Daniel said bluntly, without even pretending to smile. "They're hand-stitched in Milan. Most of our clients make appointments to view these pieces." His words dripped with disdain, his message clear: "You don't belong here." Richard looked at him, calm and collected, but said nothing. He simply adjusted the sleeve of one of the jackets on the hanger, as though Daniel's comment hadn't mattered at all. He knew this type of store well. He knew how shallow judgments could be, how quickly people wrote others off because of clothes, shoes, or appearances. But what no one in that boutique realized was that Richard Thompson wasn't just some random man off the street. He wasn't a window shopper. He wasn't a nobody. Richard was a billionaire, one of the most successful self-made entrepreneurs in America. His face wasn't plastered across magazines, but his businesses spanned real estate, tech investments, and private equity. He lived in a mansion on the outskirts of Los Angeles, drove luxury cars when he felt like it, and could have bought everything in that boutique 10 times over without even blinking. But today, he hadn't come dressed like a billionaire. Today, he had come dressed like an ordinary man. And in doing so, he had revealed the true colors of the people standing before him. The associates had no idea. They continued ignoring him, whispering to one another, while rushing to assist another customer who had just walked in, a young woman dressed head to toe in designer brands. They treated her like royalty, pulling pieces off racks for her, offering champagne, showering her with compliments. Meanwhile, Richard was left alone, as though his presence in the store was an inconvenience rather than an opportunity. Minutes passed, and Richard walked toward the counter where Amanda and Daniel stood. He asked politely if someone could help him try on a suit. Amanda sighed and glanced at Daniel, then back at Richard. "Sir, trying these on requires an appointment. We don't usually allow casual browsing." Her words carried an unspoken insult. Richard studied her for a moment, then offered a faint smile. "I see. So you decide who's worthy of trying on clothes here?" Amanda didn't answer. Instead, she forced a laugh, brushing him off. Daniel muttered under his breath, "It's obvious he's wasting our time." But Richard didn't raise his voice. He didn't get angry. He simply nodded, as though filing away every word, every look, every insult. Deep inside, however, something was boiling. He had been underestimated before. Early in his life, before the billions, people had ignored him, laughed at him, treated him as if he had no value. And he had fought his way out of that shadow with hard work, determination, and brilliance. To be treated this way again, after everything he had built, struck a nerve he couldn't ignore. He turned to leave, his steps slow, his demeanor calm. The associates smirked, believing they had gotten rid of him. To them, he was just another man who couldn't afford their store. But they were wrong. Dead wrong. As the glass doors closed behind him, Richard pulled out his phone. He dialed a number quickly, his voice steady but firm when the call connected. "Yes, it's me. I want you to contact the corporate office of the boutique on Rodeo Drive. I don't care what it costs. I want the entire store, everything, the building, the inventory, the brand license. Make it happen." He hung up, his face unreadable, but inside, his decision was already set in stone. If they wanted to treat him like he didn't belong, then he would remind them, in the most unforgettable way, exactly who he was. And soon, the associates who mocked him would find out that they hadn't just insulted a man they thought was poor. They had insulted the man who was about to own their entire world. The late afternoon sun cast a golden glow over Rodeo Drive, but inside the boutique, the atmosphere remained the same, polished, pristine, and full of quiet arrogance. Amanda and Daniel continued fussing over their preferred clients, pouring sparkling water, adjusting garments, and lavishing compliments. They had already forgotten about Richard the man in worn-out jeans, who had dared to walk among their racks of designer suits. To them, he was irrelevant, just another face that didn't belong in their carefully curated world. What they didn't know was that outside those glass doors, wheels were already in motion. Richard's phone call had set off a chain reaction that would change everything. His assistant, Carolyn, a sharp and efficient woman who had been with him for over a decade, immediately reached out to the corporate owners of the luxury brand. Within minutes, negotiations began. Richard didn't haggle, didn't hesitate. He simply gave one instruction. "I want this store. Full purchase. Whatever their asking price is, match it. If they resist, double it." While Amanda and Daniel smirked at their chosen clientele inside, executives in glass towers across Los Angeles were scrambling. A buyer of Richard's stature wasn't someone you ignored. His name carried weight in boardrooms, in investment circles, in luxury markets worldwide. He wasn't just wealthy. He was influential, capable of turning brands into household names with a single partnership. And now, he wanted their flagship boutique on Rodeo Drive. Back inside the store, Amanda noticed Richard pass by the storefront again, glancing in briefly before walking down the sidewalk. She chuckled under her breath and whispered to Daniel, "He's still hanging around. Probably can't even afford a necktie from here." Daniel laughed, shaking his head. "It never fails. People like him walk in, thinking they can play dress up, and then reality hits. This place isn't for everyone. They didn't realize the irony in their words, that in just a short time, the very man they mocked would own the floor they stood on, the racks they guarded, and the very jobs they thought gave them power. Meanwhile, Richard returned to his car, a sleek but unassuming black SUV, parked a few blocks away. He sat in the driver's seat, looking out at the buzzing street. To any passerby, he looked like a tired man resting after a long walk. But his mind was sharp, calculating, remembering every detail of how he had been treated. He thought back to the days when he had nothing, when he had been dismissed for not wearing the right clothes, for not having the right look, for daring to step into places where others decided he didn't belong. That memory had never left him. And today, those associates had reawakened at dot as his phone buzzed with updates from Caroline. Richard leaned back in his seat, letting the plan unfold. The deal was moving faster than anyone expected. Money has a way of bending time, and Richard's billions spoke louder than anything else. Within hours, a preliminary agreement was reached. The store, its assets, and its brand rights were on their way to belonging entirely to him. But Richard wasn't interested in simply owning a building. No, he wanted something more. He wanted a lesson to be taught. A reminder that arrogance, judgment, and disrespect always come with consequences. That evening, Amanda and Daniel finished their shifts, locking up the boutique without a second thought about the man they had dismissed. To them, it had been just another day of turning away the undeserving and catering to the wealthy elite. They had no idea that their entire world was already shifting beneath their feet. The next morning, Richard received confirmation. The purchase was finalized. He now owned the boutique, every marble tile, every shimmering chandelier, every overpriced suit hanging in the store. His face didn't show triumph. Instead, it showed resolve. This wasn't about revenge. It was about respect. It was about showing people that wealth doesn't always wear a shiny suit or drive a flashy car. Sometimes it walks in wearing faded jeans and worn-out shoes. By noon, Richard's team arranged a quiet meeting with the boutique's manager and staff. They were told to report to the store early for an important announcement from corporate. Amanda and Daniel arrived, both annoyed that their Sunday morning had been interrupted. They whispered complaints under their breath as they gathered with the others, straightening their uniforms, preparing to impress whoever was about to walk through the doors. When the glass doors swung open, it wasn't a faceless executive who walked in. It was Richard, the same man they had ignored, mocked, and dismissed less than 24 hours ago. Amanda's face froze. Daniel's smirk vanished. The other staff members looked confused, whispering among themselves. What was he doing here again? Why had he been called to this meeting? Richard stepped forward slowly, his calm demeanor commanding the room without effort. He looked around at the pristine boutique, then at the staff who stared at him with disbelief. And finally he spoke, his voice steady, confident, and filled with quiet power. "Some of you may remember me from yesterday," he began, his eyes scanning Amanda and Daniel. "You didn't think I belonged here. You made sure I knew that. But today, I stand here not as a customer. Today, I stand here as the new owner of this boutique." The room fell into stunned silence. Mouths dropped open. Eyes widened. Amanda's face went pale as her hands fidgeted nervously. Daniel swallowed hard, his arrogance evaporating in an instant. Richard let the silence linger, the weight of his words sinking in. Then he added, "And before you ask, yes, this is real. As of this morning, everything in this store, from the walls to the racks, belongs to me." The staff exchanged shocked glances, struggling to process what had just happened. Amanda looked like she might faint. Daniel's pride collapsed in on itself, leaving only fear behind. Richard didn't gloat. He didn't raise his voice. He simply stood tall, his presence more powerful than any luxury brand logo ever could be. He had made his move. And now, it was time to deliver the lesson that would echo far beyond those marble walls. The air inside the boutique felt heavy, as though the walls themselves had absorbed the shock of Richard's words. Silence lingered for several long seconds, the kind of silence that demands attention, that forces people to confront what they've just heard. Amanda's face was drained of color, her perfectly applied lipstick now trembling against her nervous expression. Daniel stood rigid, his usual confidence replaced with disbelief. The other associates shuffled uncomfortably, their eyes darting between Richard and the two who had so clearly underestimated him. Richard let them sit in that silence. He knew the weight of truth was far more powerful than anger. He walked slowly around the boutique, his fingers brushing over the polished glass counters and sleek marble shelves. He studied the racks as though he were seeing them for the first time. Then, without turning, he spoke again. Yesterday, when I came into this store, I wasn't wearing $1,000 suit. I wasn't covered in designer labels. I didn't arrive in a Rolls-Royce. And for that reason, I was ignored, dismissed, and insulted. Not because of who I am, but because of what I looked like. He paused, finally turning to face Amanda and Daniel. Their eyes refused to meet his, but his gaze was unrelenting. You judged me. You decided I wasn't worthy of your time. You made assumptions about my worth, my ability, and my place in this store. And you were wrong. Amanda stammered, her voice breaking under the pressure. Sir, we didn't mean. Richard raised a hand, silencing her. His tone was calm but firm. Oh, you meant it. Every smirk, every dismissive glance, every condescending word, you meant every one of them. And that's the problem. The other associates stood in absolute silence, their hearts pounding as they realized this wasn't just about Amanda and Daniel. This was about all of them. This was about a culture of arrogance that had gone unchecked, a culture that valued appearances over humanity. Richard continued, his voice now carrying a quiet intensity that cut deeper than any shouted words. Let me ask you something. If a man walks in here dressed like me yesterday, jeans, worn shoes, no visible labels, what do you see? A man unworthy of respect? A man who doesn't belong? Or do you see a potential customer? A human being? Because the way you treated me yesterday wasn't just unprofessional, it was inhumane. Amanda's eyes welled with tears, her mascara threatening to run. Daniel's jaw clenched, but he couldn't summon a response. Richard wasn't humiliating them with insults. He was holding up a mirror, forcing them to see themselves exactly as they had been. Then Richard shifted, his tone softening but still powerful. I built my success on one principle: never underestimate anyone. When I was younger, I was treated the same way you treated me yesterday. People laughed at me, ignored me, told me I didn't belong. But I worked, I sacrificed, and I proved them wrong. And now I stand here owning the very store where you decided I wasn't worth your time. He stepped closer, his presence commanding. Let me make this clear. Money doesn't define a person. Clothes don't define a person. Status doesn't define a person. Character does. Respect does. The way you treat people when you think they have nothing, that defines you more than anything else. The staff remained frozen, their eyes glued to him, their hearts pounding with guilt, shame, and realization. Richard turned back toward Amanda and Daniel. So here's what's going to happen. This store is mine now, and it will run differently. No customer will ever again be treated as though they don't belong. No assumptions will be made based on what someone wears or how they look. From now on, this boutique will value respect first, sales second. And if anyone here can't adapt to that, his voice hardened, there's the door. The room was so quiet The ticking of the clock on the wall seemed deafening. Amanda swallowed hard, her tears finally breaking free. Daniel's hands shook at his sides. Richard's eyes scanned the rest of the staff. You may think this is just about luxury fashion, but it's not. It's about life. Out there, every single day, people are dismissed, ignored, and underestimated because they don't fit someone's shallow definition of worth. But let me tell you something. A man you laugh at today could be the one who signs your paycheck tomorrow. Gasps rippled quietly among the staff. The weight of the lesson was undeniable. They weren't just hearing the words of a billionaire. They were hearing the lived truth of someone who had risen from nothing and carried scars that money could never erase. Richard let his words settle like heavy stones in their hearts. Then, for the first time, he offered a faint smile. Respect is free. It costs you nothing. And yet, it can change everything for you and for the person receiving it. Amanda finally whispered, I'm sorry. Daniel followed with a shaky, we didn't know. Richard nodded slowly. No, you didn't know. And that's why this lesson matters. Because you never know who's standing in front of you. You never know what battles they've fought, what they've overcome, or what they're capable of. That's why you treat everyone with respect. Not because of who they are, but because of who you are. The boutique was no longer just a store that morning. It had become a stage for a lesson that would echo far beyond Rodeo Drive. A lesson in humility. A lesson in humanity. And it was only the beginning of the transformation Richard intended to bring. The boutique's walls seemed to echo with Richard's words, and though his tone had softened, the lesson weighed heavily on everyone inside. Amanda dabbed her eyes with a tissue she pulled hurriedly from her pocket, while Daniel shifted uncomfortably, as though the marble floor beneath him had turned unstable. The other associates avoided eye contact, ashamed but curious about what would happen next. Richard clasped his hands behind his back and began pacing the boutique floor, his calm steps contrasting with the storm of emotions swirling in the room. Now that I own this place, he began, I want each of you to understand something. This store isn't just a collection of overpriced suits and handbags. It's an opportunity. It's a chance to prove that luxury doesn't have to mean arrogance. That style doesn't have to mean superiority. Luxury should stand for quality, for craftsmanship, for beauty, not for judgment. He turned toward the towering racks of Italian suits, his gaze thoughtful. When people walk through these doors, I don't care what they're wearing. They could be in jeans, they could be in sweatpants, or they could be in a tuxedo. What matters is how you treat them. Because every person who enters here deserves respect. And if you can't offer that, you have no place in this store. The room stayed silent, the staff listening intently. The weight of responsibility was beginning to settle on their shoulders. Then Richard paused, his voice deepening. Amanda, Daniel, both froze, their names hitting them like thunder. He locked eyes with each of them in turn. Yesterday, you had the chance to treat me with decency. You had the chance to prove that you were professionals, that you valued your customers. Instead, you chose arrogance. You chose disrespect. And now, you'll live with the consequences of that choice. Amanda's lip trembled, her mascara smudged. Please, sir, she whispered. It won't happen again. I promise. Daniel cleared his throat, his voice stiff. We didn't realize who you were. Richard's gaze hardened. That's the point. You shouldn't have to know who someone is to treat them with respect. If kindness only comes out when you think someone is rich or powerful, then it's not kindness at all, it's selfishness. The words struck like lightning. Amanda dropped her gaze, and Daniel's head lowered in shame. The other associates shuffled nervously, aware that Richard wasn't just reprimanding two people, he was setting a new standard for everyone. Richard let the silence stretch, then continued. I could fire you both today. I could replace this entire staff with people who understand the value of humility. But I believe in lessons. And sometimes the hardest lessons are the ones that leave a mark. He walked toward the counter, resting his hand on the polished surface. You will stay, but not in the positions you think you deserve. From today forward, you will start at the bottom. No more special treatment. No more pretending to know who belongs and who doesn't. You'll greet every customer. You'll carry bags. You'll clean the floors if necessary. And only when you've proven that you understand respect, not status, will you earn back your place here. Gasps rippled through the staff. Amanda covered her mouth in shock. Daniel's face reddened with humiliation. But Richard's expression remained steady. You judged me for wearing worn-out clothes. Now you'll learn what it feels like to earn your place back through humility, not arrogance. He turned to the rest of the team. As for the rest of you, you have a choice. You can adapt to this new culture, where respect comes first, or you can leave. There's the door. No one is forced to stay. But if you choose to remain, know this. From today onward, this boutique will stand for something greater than status. It will stand for dignity, for equality, for humanity. The staff exchanged uneasy glances, but no one moved toward the door. Deep down, they all knew he was right. Deep down, they understood this was bigger than one store. It was about who they were as people. Richard's tone softened again as he walked toward the center of the boutique. I'm not here to embarrass you. I'm here to remind you that everyone matters. I want this store to be known, not just for its fashion, but for its heart. I want people to leave here feeling respected, whether they spend $10 or $10,000. That's how you build loyalty. That's how you build legacy. Amanda wiped her eyes, nodding through her tears. Daniel swallowed hard, finally whispering, I understand. Richard gave a small nod. Good, because this is more than just business. This is personal. And if we get it right, this store will become something far greater than any price tag. The boutique, once a shrine to shallow luxury, now felt like a place on the verge of transformation. Richard had planted the seed of change. Now it was up to them to water it. The boutique was silent, every associate standing still, as though the very air had shifted inside those glass walls. For years, the store had thrived on exclusivity, on treating only a select few with dignity, while quietly dismissing the rest. But in a single morning, Richard had shattered that culture and rebuilt it into something entirely new. His presence wasn't just that of a new owner. It was the presence of someone who had lived through the pain of being underestimated and now stood as living proof of what respect, hard work, and humility could create. Richard turned slowly, his eyes scanning the floor, the racks, the chandeliers above. He took in every detail, but what mattered most to him wasn't the marble floors or the $1,000,000 inventory. It was the people, the staff who now stood humbled, the ones who had mocked him now standing pale and quiet, the ones who had remained silent, now carrying guilt in their eyes. And beyond them, the invisible presence of every customer who had ever been turned away, ignored, or judged unfairly in this very place. Luxury means nothing, Richard said, his voice calm but resonant, if it comes at the expense of humanity. A suit, a handbag, a dress, they're just fabric until you attach meaning to them. And meaning is built not on arrogance, but on respect. From this day forward, this store will no longer be a symbol of exclusion. It will be a symbol of dignity. The staff listened, hanging on every word. Amanda clutched her hands tightly in front of her, silently weeping. Daniel's jaw clenched, not with pride, but with the weight of accountability. The others nodded slowly, understanding that they weren't just employees anymore. They were part of a lesson much greater than themselves. Richard stepped toward the large front windows. The busy energy of Rodeo Drive spilling in from outside. Tourists snapped photos. Shoppers strutted in designer outfits. Cars worth more than houses rolled by. To the world outside, this was just another boutique. But inside, something extraordinary had happened. He turned back to his staff one last time. You don't know who's walking through that door. Maybe it's someone with nothing in their pockets, or maybe it's someone with the power to buy this entire block. But here's the truth, you should treat them the same. Because the value of a person has nothing to do with their wallet and everything to do with their humanity. Never forget that. The words echoed, not just in the boutique, but in the hearts of everyone who heard them. It was a message that went beyond sales, beyond luxury, beyond the glittering streets of Beverly Hills. It was a reminder for life itself. Amanda wiped her tears, finally whispering, "We'll do better." Daniel lowered his head in shame, finally humbled. The rest of the team nodded, determination etched on their faces. They understood. This wasn't just about keeping their jobs. It was about becoming better people. Richard gave one final nod, his expression soft but firm. Good, because this isn't just a store anymore. It's a promise, and that promise begins today. He turned, walking toward the glass doors. The sunlight spilled in, wrapping around him as he stepped outside. The city buzzed around him, unaware that inside that boutique, a revolution had just taken place. He didn't look back. He didn't need to. The lesson had been delivered. And the story of the man in worn-out clothes, the billionaire who was mocked, ignored, and underestimated, would spread far beyond Rodeo Drive. It would echo in living rooms, workplaces, and schools. It would serve as a reminder that you never truly know who's standing in front of you, because sometimes the one you dismiss as unworthy is the very one who has the power to change everything. And now, let me ask you, if you had been one of those employees, what would you have done? Would you have judged Richard by his clothes, or treated him with respect no matter what? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, because your perspective matters. Don't forget to hit the like button if this story inspired you. Subscribe for more powerful stories of life, lessons, and second chances. And share this video with someone who needs a reminder. Respect costs nothing, but it can change everything. Because true wealth isn't measured by money. It's measured by the way we treat people.